Morning, everyone. This morning's reading is from Numbers, chapter 21, verses 21 through 33. 22 through 23. 33. Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the Moabite officials. But God was very angry when he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, it turned off the road into a field. Balaam beat it to get it back on the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path through the vineyards with walls on both sides. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it pressed close to the wall, crushing Balaam's foot against it. So he beat the donkey again. Then the angel of the Lord moved on ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn, either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it lay down under Balaam, and he was angry and beat it with his staff. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth and said to Balaam, "What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times?" Balaam answered the donkey, "You have made a fool of me. If only I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." The donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" "No," he said. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn. So he bowed low and fell face down. The angel of the Lord asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you because your path is a reckless one before me." The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If it had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared it. Wayne?
Okay, not going to cooperate with me. Scott, you're on. Technology is a wonderful thing. Actually, my laptop was acting up earlier, and I probably should have rebooted it. But I remember when I was young, and I heard a lesson about this story. And you know, as you read the story, you can't help but be just kind of really intrigued by it. I mean, you've got a guy who's got a hot temper and he abuses his animal. And you've got an animal that suddenly is empowered by God to talk. And I guess the thing that has always intrigued me about this story is that Balaam doesn't seem to be terribly amazed that his animal just talked to him. And it's like, what's going on here? Okay, for this to make sense, what we need to do is do a little bit of the backstory. And it begins actually in the chapter before, that the children of Israel are in the process of traveling from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land. This is that 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, but it's reaching the point that now they're getting ready to move into the Promised Land. It isn't that they're moving through places that are abandoned, you know, there's nobody desolate, there's nobody living there. The fact is that there are different nations along the way, different kings. And so the kings see this big nation of people with its army, you know, coming toward them, and naturally they go out and attack. Well, with God blessing Israel, each one of these kings is being defeated. And so as they have defeated the Amorites, a king named Balak assumes he's the next in line. And Balak panics. he realizes there's absolutely no way that his army can defeat Israel. So he starts thinking about, well, what could be the possible alternative solution? And he knows of a prophet, we use that term in quotes, by the name of Balaam. And Balaam has an amazing track record. Balak expresses it. He says, whoever you bless is blessed, whoever you curse is cursed. So, I want you to come and curse Israel for me. I want you to put something on them that's going to keep them from going on. But one of the things about Balaam is that he is not Israelite. There are some things about this story that kind of defy our typical understandings of things, because he's not part of God's covenant people. He's not a prophet in the sense that we understand that word in Israel. He's probably more of what we call in the Old Testament a diviner. That is a man who deals in omens and portents and animals cut open and reading the entrails. Of looking at the stars. And yet, he has a track record that's pretty impressive. And so that makes him, and I'm going to use the term, a prophet for hire. Come and I'll pay you. But I want you to curse Israel. And so to get to this point, he wants to appeal to Balaam. And so he sends a delegation, and if you look at the text back and earlier in the chapter, he sends the elders of Moab and Midian. Doesn't tell us how many, but it sounds like it must be a pretty impressive group. And they come to Balaam with what the Old Testament refers to as a fee for divination. Divination is that reading the entrails, seeing the stars, and these people in that world, and there are places today with the same kind of thing. We might call it a fortune teller type of thing. And they do it for money. And so you come and pay your fee. I did some looking to see if I could find out what that might have been, but there was couldn't find an actual suggestion of what the fee for divination might be, but it seems like there was an expected amount of money or whatever that you would give to the diviner. And so they come to him and make the appeal. And so Balaam says, okay, I've got to ask God. So go away till tomorrow and we'll get together. And so he asks God. And God says, no, don't go. And so they go back to Balak with the news. We don't have any real mention of what his reaction was. Obviously disappointment. But being king, Balak doesn't take no for an answer. So he sends a second group. And what's interesting is that the text uses the expression, it says that he sends a group that is more numerous and distinguished. And I'm kind of thinking, okay, what's more distinguished than the elders of Moab and Midian? But he sends a group to make a second appeal. And this time, the offer is a handsome reward. Not just your typical fee for divination, but enough to make you really, really comfortable. I couldn't help but think about that line, what is it, The Godfather? I'm going to make an offer you can't refuse. And you can imagine old Balaam here. He's got to know from God already. So what possibly could he expect? So he goes to God again. And he says, as he leaves them, he says, well, let's go see what else God will tell me. And it kind of reminds me, parents, you understand this? You got your children, and maybe remember back when your children were young, and they ask you for something and you say no. And what do? They come back later and they try to figure out a different way to ask it, because when there's something that we really want, or they do the other thing, which is not part of this story, and they go to the other parent to see if they can get a different answer. And it seems like that's what Balaam has in mind. Well, maybe God will give me a different answer this time. And so there's a surprise. Call it a strange twist. That he gets a different answer. God says, yes, you can go, but only do what I tell you. That kind of sets the terms. Balaam, you should understand what that means. And so he goes with the princes of Moab, and he takes 2 of his servants with him. But then it says God was very angry when he went. And an angel from the Lord blocked his path. So what's happening here? Okay, now think about this. That in one verse, God says go. And 2 verses later, verse 22, Scott, you need to be moving this. In 2 verses later, verse 22, there's an angel blocking the path that says, God got angry. What happens in 2 verses where God gives him permission, and then there's, my term for it is it would be a very definite no. I don't want you doing this. And the only thing that I can figure as I look at this is something in Balaam himself, his own attitude, that's part of this. And I think the key word is, and we'll kind of jump ahead just to point it out, is that the angel will say to him, you are doing something very reckless. Well, what is the attitude that's here? And it lies in the fact that Balaam wants to go. He really, really wants to go. Why? He wants the money. He's been offered a handsome reward. At one point he did say, if you gave me a palace full of silver and gold, I couldn't go. But now, that's just, there are people like that. We kind of joke about somebody saying, well, I can be bought. Balaam can be bought. You think about it. Balaam is a pagan. He is not a member of God's covenant people. He doesn't have the same sense of values. He's a soothsayer for profit. That's his income. And so being offered a handsome fortune is more than he can handle. And so we have kind of an interesting thing here, and I think I've probably gotten a little bit out of order here, but as he is going, the donkey sees the angel and stops. First time goes off into the deal. Balaam whips the tar out of the donkey. Second time, they're going between two walls. And Balaam beats the donkey. Third time, donkey just lies down. And he beats the donkey. Now, here's a guy who has an anger issue. And so, with that anger issue, it says that God opened the donkey's mouth. And the donkey spoke. Why are you beating me? I mean, that's a reasonable question. I mean, we live in a world where abuse of animals is something that, at least in our culture, is something that is illegal, but it's offensive to most of us. You know, you may have, when you heard the story, if you weren't familiar with it before, you may have found Balaam's behavior to be just repugnant. I mean, who treats an animal that way? So what's going on? And then, as the donkey's talking with him, and I think, you know, I've been your donkey. I've been your servant. I have faithfully helped you. So why the beating? And then God opens his eyes and he sees the angel. And he falls on his face. You know, it's one of those things about human beings that often we jump to conclusions and we make assumptions. You know, it seems like he's been assuming the donkey's disobedient and stubborn. Why? That's kind of the reputation of the animal, right? And so, beat that thing. And now the angel speaks and asks him, why did you beat your donkey? And the angel said something that I think is really interesting. Is that I would have killed you. And I would have let the donkey live. Wow. That's powerful. And so what Balaam has assumed about the donkey's unfaithfulness and disobedience and stubbornness actually is donkey's faithfulness. He's been looking after his master, not disobeying him. Yeah, it makes for a very interesting and very intriguing story. You think about, I guess, the basic human nature that's involved here. Balaam, like most people, has an end that he wants. There's a goal in mind, a reward. And doesn't matter what he has to do to get there. He's going to go for it anyway. I suspect in that gap between those two verses, where God says go, and then God puts the angel in front of him, and God is angry, that I suspect, we don't have anything in the story, but I just have this mental image of Balaam going, oh goody, I get to go. I don't know if you've ever had a situation like that, even when you were young, and there's something you weren't going to be able to do, and suddenly you're going to be able to do it. You know, you're just really, really happy. And then thinking, okay, I'm going to get this. And that's all he's thinking about. But his self-focus, his desires, his selfishness, are his real motivation. You know, and I think the fact that he's really not a prophet from God. But, you know, again, He's not intrigued by a talking donkey. How about being intrigued by an angelic appearance? That was an angel that was ready to kill him. But doesn't seem to be getting through. And I think that's kind of the way we are. We think about ourselves. We think about what we want. And that becomes our goal. You know, what's interesting is if you look at the New Testament, the idea of temptation is identified by three basic things. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. In other words, that this is human ego running amok, the human desire, what I want. Whether it is something I want in terms of appetite and desire, whether it's something I want in terms of something that looks great, or whether it's something I want in terms of what would be flattering. And you know, if you think about the story, that Balaam probably fits the bill in all of these. That something about this whole setup for him is really important. And I would just say that as you look at him, and you look at his attitude, that there is a mock, and I'm going to use the word, a mock repentance when the angel confronts him. He says, I repent. He says, okay, if you want, I'll go back. But see, you know how you know that that's a mock thing? Is that when he gets to Balak, and he's supposed to curse Israel, the only words that come out of his mouth are blessing for Israel. And Balak keeps asking him, now come on, you got to be able to do better than that. And then Balaam does the one thing that he can do. And that is not in terms of the blessing and the cursing that he has as some kind of seer, but it is as just a human being. And he gives Balak some advice about how to bring down Israel. And that's through immorality. Balaam is not interested in doing what's right. He's not interested in serving God, even though he's encountered God in terms of an angel and voices from God. He's interested in his prophet. And see, for us, human beings, you know, not us personally, but human beings, see, what we try to do is we try to rationalize. We try to find ways to excuse and say, yeah, I know God's word says this. I know the Bible tells me. But I don't like that idea. I want this. And you know, that's kind of unfortunate. Because that puts us in the ballpark of old Balaam here. And sets us up to disobey God. Even though we're happy for the moment with what we think that we're doing, or what we want to do. You know, it's already been mentioned this morning, but I think it's really important passage. Jesus said, if anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. You know, it's turning over leadership and control of my life to the Lord. It's letting him show me what I should be and what I should do. Cass showed it a song for us to close with, and it's just so incredibly appropriate. It says, have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will. while I am waiting, yielded and still. I want to be your person. I want to follow your lead. I don't want to override your will in my life. See, whose will am I listening to? Is it my will or God's will? Maybe you're here and you're not yet a Christian. I want to encourage you to think about your relationship with God and encourage you that if there's some way that we can help you with that, you can talk with me, with Chad, with one of the elders. Maybe as a Christian, you want one of the elders to pray with you. You can let us know that. Let's stand as we sing.